One of the most common questions I get is, why do we need to add more light even when filming in bright environment? After all, if the sun is already providing plenty of light, isn't that enough? Well, the answer comes down to controlling not only the brightness level, but also the separation between our highlights, midtones, and our shadows, something we often refer to as ratios. Light levels simply refer to the brightness level of everything in the frame. We use levels for two main functions. Number one, proper exposure. Every camera sensor has an optimal range for capturing details, and managing your light levels ensure that you're working within that range. Now, it's important as a cinematographer that you understand your sensor's dynamic range in order to capture light at the correct level. So for example, at what level do your highlights get blown out? Or at what level do you start introducing grain in your shadows? On set, we often use terms like, hey, I need more level in the background, meaning we need to raise the background's brightness. But levels also play a crucial role in making sure we have separations between highlights, midtones, and shadows. By managing light levels, we can separate our subject from the background and define different areas of the frame more clearly. Without separation, everything blends together, making it much harder to control the image in post-production. So even when filming outside in broad daylight, we need to control our levels to establish what are the shadows, midtones, and highlights. That separation is often referred to as ratio. When communicating with the gaffer, for example, you would say something like, I want a 4:1 ratio between my highlights and my midtones. This will let your gaffer know that you're asking for 2 stops of separation between your highlights and your midtones. Now, I'll devote a full video to stops in the future. It is crucial as a professional cinematographer to measure your levels on set during production. This is not something you can do with just your eyes. You can use tools like a light meter, false colors, waveform, or even zebras. A histogram is not a great tool since it's a representation of the brightness level of the entire image. You're not able to measure different part of it. You can check out my videos on learning how to read scopes to find out more. By using these tools, you can make informed decisions on where to place additional lights and how to shape contrast in your scene. So let me show you 2 different shots of the same scene. We just have a group of students sitting outside interacting with each other. This first shot is actually our test shot. We're still moving lights around, getting ready for our takes. And I don't have any additional lighting set for this particular shot. So the only thing I can do here is adjust my camera settings to make sure that my sky doesn't blow out or the whites on their shirt, for example, doesn't clip. And that's it. I have no other control. If we look at the false color, we actually have no separation between our midtones and our shadows, or very little. They're all within a range. Like false color is not precise to the IRE, it's still a range. And so when we see like the green color, for example, then we know it's in the range between 35 and 40 IRE. And so there is some discrepancy, but we can see that for the majority of this image, everything falls within that 30 to 40 IRE as far as the main area of our scene. We have good separation between the highlights, which is the sky, and shadows, for example, but between midtones and shadows, we have very little separation. And what that means is in post-production, if I want to adjust those midtones, I'm going to raise all the shadows with it. And so it's just very limiting in our ability to control the image in post-production. If we go to the second shot, now we're using a bounce board, a silver bounce board that's actually placed kind of like, off frame at this angle. And then the sun, which is actually in this corner here somewhere, is, we're bouncing that sunlight back onto the students. And we focused mainly on those 3 because I didn't have a very big silver bounce board. I think it was a 4x4, and I only had one. And so I had to kind of pick and choose. And for some reason, this first group was a little brighter. And I think it's because the steps in front of them are in more sunlight. And so that sun is actually beaming sunlight on this concrete that's bouncing back up at them a little bit. And so I had less concern about that particular group. So I decided to put my silver bounce on that side to bounce slide towards those 3 girls. And here, at first glance, obviously we can see that they're much brighter than the first shot. But what's important here, if I go to the false color, is we can see now separation between the shadows, for example, the green of those columns or those bushes, and the faces of my students, where we now are playing in the 50s to the 60s IRE range. And so that allows me in post-production now to really be able to control the final outcome. I can adjust the shadows without interfering too much on their faces, or I can bring the midtones up a little bit without raising the entire image. Now, I wish I had more. I wish I could have, maybe bring the bounce board closer, but because I wanted that white shot, I really didn't have space to bring that silver bounce closer to raise the levels even more. And that's something that you have to be conscious about. Sure, I love high contrast ratios, but you're limited to the equipment that you have available and the environment. It's very difficult in broad daylight to say to your gaffer, I want an 8:1 ratio. It would be very, very difficult unless, again, you have some really, really bright light source that you can blast your subject with. So you have to be aware of what your limitations are as far as an equipment standpoint. But at the very minimum, make sure that you have some separations by checking your levels. Now, thank you for watching this video until the end. As a token of my appreciation, I'd like to offer you my free camera setting cheat sheet. Just follow the link below to download your free cheat sheet. Thanks again, and happy filming.